wild
Would you ever have
kids.
Tate on your podcast?
It's a conversation, right?
And then Joe Rogan was talking about us. I think Joe and I, at some point in the future, are going to have a nice long conversation. I have a feeling it's going to be a very, very interesting time. It's probably the only thing I'd bother traveling to America for. So I look forward to getting in touch with Joe again. We were talking on Instagram before my Instagram got taken down, but I have other routes to get through to him and talk to Joe. So I'm really excited to get.
When Patrick Bet David went on JRE a few months ago, he caused a stir by challenging Rogan to have Donald Trump on his podcast. He even went as far as to say that by not having Trump on the podcast, he would indirectly be assisting Joe Biden in winning re-election. God knows how Biden makes it past Christmas though. Anyway, at the time it was obvious that PBD was fishing for a viral clip, but I remember thinking at the time, don't worry about Donald Trump, what about Andrew Tate? You see, Rogan talks about Andrew Tate on his podcast all the time. He's totally clued into everything happening in his world, and it's obvious that he's following all the latest with Tate's ongoing case in Romania. Now, I understand that Tate has been under house arrest in Romania, as his case obviously continues. However, I saw over the weekend that he made an application to travel to the United States to visit his dying grandma or something. So on his way to the courtroom, he said, "So we're just going to hopefully get some freedom back and go back to America. We want to visit our grandma and just live a normal life. It's been a long time now, been going on for a long time, and we're looking forward to a conclusion." Now, from what I've heard as of Monday, December the 11th, him and his brother are now able to travel anywhere in Romania, but I haven't seen any reports about them being allowed to travel to the US. But already the speculation has mounted that, number one, if he does get permission to travel to America, he'll never come back, and number two, when he's in the US, he should go on JRE. On the Associated Press video on YouTube that followed him to the tribunal last week to hear his application, the top comment read, "A Joe Rogan appearance would break YouTube, just saying." Now, apart from the fact that JRE episodes aren't on YouTube, they are 100% correct. Rogan and Tate face-to-face on JRE would be absolutely mind-blowing, especially after the highly anticipated appearance of The Rock recently that turned out to be a massive train wreck. But here's the problem. As most of you already know, during the pandemic, Rogan supposedly had several controversial guests on the podcast, which he ended up apologizing for and declaring his intention to have a more balanced variety of guests on JRE.
You know, I do all the scheduling myself, and I don't always get it right. These podcasts are very strange because they're just conversations, and oftentimes I have no idea what I'm going to talk about until I sit down and talk to people, and that's why some of my ideas are not that prepared or fleshed out, because I'm literally having them in real time. But I do my best, and they're just conversations, and I think that's also the appeal of the show. It's one of the things that makes it interesting. So I want to thank Spotify for being so supportive during this time. And I'm very sorry that this is happening to them and that they're taking so much heat from it.
If you recall Rogan's Hello Friends video, he basically begged for forgiveness and, like I said, committed to being more careful in future. Since then, JRE has become kind of boring. But do you know what? I don't actually think that's the reason why Rogan won't end up having Andrew Tate on his podcast. I think the reason why it'll never happen is a lot deeper than just playing it safe and keeping sponsors on side. So I'm going to explain in detail why Andrew Tate has Rogan by the nutsack and why Rogan has to be careful not to get on the wrong side of the man himself, as well as his massive fan base. And just as a quick side note, the first comment to pick up the Pink Floyd reference in today's video gets pinned.
You know, look, Romania, I don't know what their system is like. I don't know whether they're corrupt. I've heard things, but I don't have any real information. So I'd be talking out of my ass to say, you know, if he really did like sex traffic people, if he really did all the things he's saying, well, I hope that gets proven in court, and I hope he gets punished if he really did that. If he didn't do that, I hope he gets exonerated, and I hope he gets the fuck out of Romania. I don't know. I don't know what he did. I know a lot of what he does is theater, right? A lot of what he does is very like satire. He plays the role of this boastful misogynist who smokes cigars and drives Lamborghinis, and that's his thing. And because of that, he's amassed an amazing amount of money. And he's done it by doing this character, this online persona, but then also says very wise things. He says ridiculous shit, but also says really interesting things. He's a very smart guy.
I've always found it interesting how, like we just saw in that clip, Whenever Rogan talks about Andrew Tate, he always plays both sides. It's the funniest thing ever. He starts with the whole, I acknowledge that there are all these allegations and there's an ongoing investigation. I hope they get to the bottom of everything and the truth prevails. But, he's also said some wacky things over the years. But Tate's a super smart dude. So whenever Rogan talks about Tate, he makes sure he covers all bases and keeps an open mind.
He's also selling that class.
What is the class? The Hustlers University? What is that? What are they teaching people?
To hustle.
But what do they teach? Are they...
I don't know. To hustle.
They can quit at any time they want.
It's like $70 a month and you become a top G. That's literally...
I mean... Is that bad? I don't know. Hustlers University. Experience modern wealth creation.
I haven't looked at this. I didn't know this was even real.
Yeah, no, this is what he said, like a main...
So many grifters.
Main business.
Secure your spot for just $49 is your last chance to secure a spot or a discounted price.
This weird countdown thing is such a trap.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, my
this,
God.
Was it just recycle?
I only have 1 hour, 10 minutes and 36 seconds to sign up.
And that's going to be 147.
Jesus,
if you don't make
enroll now, Jamie. You have only an hour
Let's
before this class. Enroll.
Before this.
Let's enroll. Let's enroll. What do we have to do? Click on that. Enroll now.
Okay, that was actually pretty funny, but even though Rogan was laughing at Hustlers University, you can see how he still treads carefully and asks, is that so bad? But then slips up and calls him a grifter. Oh man, that's great. And I should say, keeping an open mind and considering all sides of an argument or all points of view is a pretty wise thing to do, and Rogan is known for doing that most of the time, just depending on the topic, obviously. But I don't think that's why Rogan sits on the fence with Andrew Tate. I think Rogan full-on thinks the guy is a clown, but he would never say that. Instead, he acknowledges why Tate is so popular and even goes as far as to admit that someone like Tate is necessary. Take a look at this clip from Rogan's most recent podcast with Derek, More Plates, More Dates, where they discuss the ongoing phenomenon that is Andrew Tate, but he ends up kind of describing himself.
There's this thing that's going on where men do not feel like there's anyone that represents men in popular culture. Like what men actually talk about when they're alone, when men are just hanging out with men and not trying to impress women or trying to not get yelled at, the wild shit they talk about. And, if you can be the most exaggerated form of that, this world champion kickboxer standing there smoking a cigar, making fun of Supps, and, that's very appealing to men because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, if you're never going to see that on CNN or NBC, or it's not, no mainstream media platform is ever going to tap into this, what is obviously a lucrative market. Young guys who don't want to be like their parents, they don't want to be like their teachers, they don't want to be like any of these people they see around them that seem neutered and pot-bellied and depressing and talking about equity and inclusiveness, and they're like, Jesus Christ. And then they see this guy and like, oh,
yeah,
I like that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's definitely inspired discipline and taking action, and it's like
take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I said, Rogan just described himself, or maybe what he used to represent. I can at least speak for myself as a 35-year-old who got into JRE in my late 20s. I was drawn in because I liked how Rogan would sit around and talk smack with his buddies, give their opinions on current events and tell funny stories. He'd have random guests on with expertise in different areas, and for the most part, when he wasn't talking about bears and monkeys or fangirling over UFC fighters or waxing lyrical about the genius of stand-up comedy, it was pretty good content. I used to get this feeling when I was driving or at work or wherever that I was in the room with them. Like we say where I'm from, one of the boys. We're all just hanging out. But now that those episodes are full of brogan comedy brats stroking their egos for hours on end, it's become boring and stale content. So when guys like Jordan Peterson and then Andrew Tate came along, they filled the void that Rogan had created.
I don't think most people understand that this war is coming for everyone. It can't be avoided. You're either going to become someone like me who's fighting against it, the counterculture, or you're going to buy into it and be a victim of it. I don't think any man who wakes up and accepts the garbage that the Matrix tells them, that, yeah, it's okay to be depressed, like we just talked about. Yeah, you should be running around doing perkies and Adderall and consuming porn and sleeping with a bunch of and yeah, go to school and get an education and get in debt, and then go get a mortgage and get in debt, and then 9 to 5 and just slave away, and you'll be retired when you're 74. It's going to be fine. All the things they push, all the standardized mechanisms that a man's supposed to live his life by, I believe lead to crippling depression and sadness anyway. I don't think that makes anyone happy. So this war is twofold. You can either fight against the system and be its enemy like I am, or you can accept the system and then you're going to be fighting against yourself in your head.
So that was from George Janko's podcast last week with Andrew Tate, and it seems like Tate is going on a full-blown publicity tour. Now that he's able to travel a little bit more freely around Romania, he's trying to obviously reshape the narrative in his own favour, as expected. But what he was saying there was so interesting because, similar to Jordan Peterson, whether you agree with these guys or not, their brands thrive off division and chaos. It's the us versus them mentality that seems to be dominating politics and culture more than ever. So I'm going to come back to that in a moment because I just couldn't help myself when I heard Andrew Tate say this on Janko's podcast. Have a look.
This will be dropped. I'm not going to be found guilty because I haven't done anything wrong. But
and if you don't mind me asking, what did they try to pin you for?
They accused me of trafficking. They accused me of using the lover boy method, which is convincing girls by being nice to do a job to take the money from the girls. Because I told 2 of my friends who are girls how to get big on TikTok.
That's why all of this happened to you?
Yeah.
So did somebody else plant this on you?
Oh yeah, the Matrix.
Okay, gotcha.
You got too big.
Alrighty then, using the powers of the internet, let's take a trip down memory lane, shall we?
How much would you give them? Can you give us an idea of like how much money you were pulling on? Because I've seen you tweet about guys sending your girls like $1,000, $5,000 in cash just as a one-off.
Yeah,
And I know how desperate guys are. Like what kind of turnover were you talking? And what kind of percentage would you give the girls?
Okay, so my best girl would do about $40,000 a month.
Oh my God.
And
Sean, we're in the wrong gender.
Maybe.
And how much?
Is it 14 or 40?
40.
Oh, Christ.
Jesus.
And I'd give her $1,000 a week. I'd give her
$1,000. Okay, so that's generous. I mean, that's
so
a
she gets $1,000 a week. She gets free rent. She ain't got to worry about nothing. If I travel or we travel, I pay for everything, whatever. But $36,000 a month, I'm keeping.
Wow. And that was your best girl. What was your worst?
Well, bro, I had
The first big money I ever made in my life, I first became a multimillionaire by running a webcam studio. So I had beautiful women sitting on computers talking to guys on webcams from all around the world. That's how I first made my money. And at one point, I had 75 women in 4 locations working for me, which was stressful and the wrong way to do it. I ended up removing my army and going to special forces of around 15 people, 15 girls. And me and my brother made a lot of money doing that. But the PhD course, the PhD degree was teaching people how I managed females in those scenarios, how I controlled their emotions, how I convinced them to work and give me most of their money, how I convinced them to share me with other women, why they obeyed me. So it was never so much about out there picking up girls. It was actually something else. It was more about the psychology of things.
Yeah, nah, I'm sure that's not incriminating evidence at all. I mean, there's only hours and hours of Tate explaining in detail to his fans how to do exactly what he's being investigated for. And just before I move on, I have to point this out for you guys. Remember how Tate said this just before with Janko?
I don't think any man who wakes up and accepts the garbage that the Matrix tells them, that, yeah, it's okay to be depressed, like we just talked about. Yeah, you should be running around doing Perkies and Adderall and consuming and sleeping with a bunch of and yeah, go to school and get an education and get in debt.
Okay, so the guy who is supposedly saving us from falling for the distractions thrown in our faces every day by the Matrix got rich and famous by exploiting cam girls so he could profit from those very distractions that he is now saving us from. Oh man, that is truly brilliant right there. What an absolute clown. And that's the thing. Tate knows exactly what he's doing. The guy is a walking algorithm and he's got Joe Rogan stuck between a rock and a hard place.
I want people to understand the situation I am currently in. I am the most popular person on the planet amongst the masculine youth, which is the most feared demographic of any country, of any nation. You need them heavily psyoped for a few reasons. One, if a bunch of masculine youth get together, it's not a demonstration, it's a revolution. That's the first thing. If women start complaining with picket boards, it's a demonstration. If masculine youth get together, it's a revolution.
Then you're dangerous because you don't even have a country.
Correct. All of them. So let's continue. So I have the number one demographic the Matrix needs to psyop. One, because of the revolutionary thing. Two, because you need them. They're the backbone of the slave force. You need them to build the roads. You need them to do the real work for low pay. They're the backbone of the slave force. They do the worst, hardest jobs for the money, and they're the most depressed and most unhappy, and then women don't want to date them because they ain't got a Lambo, and they're sitting there depressed and unhappy, working their ass off, paying their taxes. You need those men psyoped. You don't want me coming along saying there's another way.
Hang on, didn't he used to make fun of brokies? Now we're apparently the most important people in the world? Man, this guy's playing chess for sure. And that's why he's got guys like Rogan on the ropes, and even Derek as well. Just listen to how these guys talk about him making sure to tread carefully and not set off Tate's army along the way.
It's wild how much content he has that exists from back then, that he's so articulate and well-spoken when he speaks about it, but then some of those videos are so vulgar and whatnot that it's hard to... I can imagine the people who are, very hard on him. You watch the old videos, it's pretty hard to side with him when you see those.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also, you got to think of what a person like that is trying to do when they're first getting attention. You're trying to be as outrageous as possible to get as much people to think about what you're saying and talk about what you're saying and engage with it.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to be like a character, an over-the-top, completely arrogant guy who's shirtless with sunglasses on, smoking a cigar, talking about hoes, and peeping hoes. It's like, is it a character or is it really you? And then when you find out, oh, well, no, he actually does run these campsites and he does have these girls working for him. Okay. But then some of the girls talk and go, actually, he's like really nice and he was kind and he gave me this business opportunity. I wound up making a lot of money with it. And you're like, oh, okay. This is complicated. Like, how much of this is theater and how much of this is like, if it's your real feelings that, these women are subhuman little robot flesh creatures that you just extract money from.
Yeah. Any interactions I've had with the guy before he was, super famous and whatnot, I've always been positive too. Like, super nice guy.
Very intelligent guy.
Yeah. Super articulate.
Extraordinarily intelligent.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely. His brother too.
Yeah.
Doesn't get as much credit, but...
they're very, very smart guys.
So here we are, guys like Rogan, Derek, Jordan Peterson, Liver King, Bradley Martin, and the Nelk girls. They have no choice. They can't call out Andrew Tate. They have to sit there like Rogan and Derek and do this balancing act where they say enough to show they're not complete Tate fanboys, but also say enough in the other direction to show that they have concerns about his integrity and his intentions. Now, let me be clear, I think Andrew Tate is an absolute clown. The guy is cashing in on the insecurities and vulnerabilities of teenage boys, and he's so clearly grifting that it's hard just not to sit here and laugh at him. But is he any different to Logan Paul, Patrick Bet-David, or Jordan Peterson? Don't get me wrong, some of those guys have some really good qualities and have made substantial contributions to the conversations that we all have, but they're all just trying to get paid, right? And they know that when it comes to Andrew Tate, their audiences have an overlap. They're preaching to the same choir, so they can't outright call him a clown like I do. As for Rogan, though, I don't think he can have Tate on his podcast at all. Think about how that would go down. It will end up being exactly like The Rock's appearance on JRE. They'll start talking, praising each other. You've done such great work, man. Oh, thank you, bro. How good is gratitude? Yeah, man, I love ice baths too. No way, let's jump in the sauna. Here, have a cigar. You're going to go far. Joe can't afford to create any real tension or ask any real questions and alienate their overlapping audience, but he also can't afford to go too soft on him and get called out by all the same voices that came for his head during the pandemic. It's a lose-lose scenario for Rogan. Tate has him in checkmate. Haven't you noticed in all of Tate's interviews, whoever's interviewing him never pushes back, except for probably Piers Morgan, whose whole brand is pushing back, most of the time anyway, but it wouldn't be any different for Rogan, and that's why I think Joe is so scared of him. It's nothing physical or anything silly like that. It's only business. And when it comes to business, the loudest mouth in the room usually wins. Just ask Conor McGregor, who incidentally has also never been on JRE. Anyway, it's all just so funny how these guys will snooker themselves like this. But that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about Rogan versus Tate. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider jumping on board so you get all of my uploads right there in your feed. Thanks for joining me. I'll catch you in the next one.
99% of laws only apply to the brokies, and that we live in a system now in the world where most things can be solved with money.
Yeah.
If you can fix a problem with money, either by buying a good lawyer or by paying a fine or by bribing a judge, then you don't have to fear the repercussions of X, right? So what I'm saying is they make a law and the broke people have to abide or they go to jail, but the rich people get to break the law and just buy their way out of it.
Yeah.
So most crimes are socioeconomic crimes. Rich people are allowed to commit the crimes and poor people are not. Look at banks. They commit financial crimes every single day. They make $100 million, they pay a $20 million fine, and they bank the profit. This is normal. So anyway, the point I'm making is you're unique, but you're not important. You need to become important. Once you become important and you become rich, then you can ignore laws. Laws don't apply to me. I go out of this house. I leave this house, right? I get up. I leave the house. I get out the house. I do whatever I want. Because if the police come and say, you're not allowed to do that, I'll say, call my lawyer or give me a fine.
Yeah.
Either way, you ain't going to do shit. I'm going to be on the next Emergency Live sitting there with the blicky, with the diamonds, talk about Scott Adams' wife. You cannot stop me.